privilege and I'm elected myself. Fine or not. Can we, Seth?
No, we should.
Okay. Okay, we switched. Commission has agreed to switch Lori Whitworth with Andrew Gannett. First, hey, Randy, you got anything for us?
I probably better, I've got a bunch of stuff, but I better do it up there.
Okay.
Then bring it all down here.
Okay.
Never do it down here.
Sounds good. Andrew?
Sure what the proper way to do this is. You got like a microphone or you just want to do it? Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Commission. Thank you for the time. Happy Valentine's Day, by the way. Maybe we can do a group hug when we're all done. Do that. That'll make everybody feel better. Basically, I'm here kind of at the Commission's disposal. You guys have received a couple of letters recently, one from Ducks Unlimited and one from Southeast Kansas Audubon Society. Copies of those are in your little packets here if you want to get to them. Main reason I wanted to be here was kind of explain what was in those letters and just kind of answer any questions you might have had. So in order to give you some context to the point of those letters, I brought some information here forward to you. Neosho County has, I guess, a heritage of wildlife, hunting, outdoor sporting, and I want to make sure that as we progress in the process of whole wind turbine scenario that we're considering that aspect of the situation carefully and giving it the consideration that's due to it. One of our biggest assets as a county is Neosho Wildlife Area, so I'm going to kind of start there real quick. I'm going to buzz through this, so if I'm losing you, just stop me and I'll get into that. But I provided a little fact sheet here about Neosho Wildlife Area, just to kind of give you some background as to its important features. It's one of only 3 properties in Kansas to be designated as what is considered an important bird area by National Audubon Society. So Neosho Wildlife Area, 2 other properties are the only ones with that designation. On an economic type scale, the wildlife area hosts 3,028 duck hunters annually from an average of 21 states. Since 2000, there have been 41 states represented in the duck hunting numbers there. On an average, Neosho Wildlife Area will host between 50 and 100,000 ducks on the property. It's also ranked number 3 on eBird's Kansas list of birding hotspots. Well, what that means in normal people terms is there's a lot of birds there and there's a lot of different birds there. So what those numbers kind of represent is that Neosho Wildlife Area specifically, but our hunting heritage and properties represent a lot of income and a lot of dollars to the county. So I wanted to kind of frame that in context of dollars, even though that's not necessarily the goal, and that it deserves our consideration. Another fact was, since 2012, there's been 700 what I call birding visits recorded on eBird, which that would be somebody going to Neosho Wildlife Area to watch the bird life there. eBird is an online tool that is used by bird watchers to record their sightings. So it represents about 25% of all bird watchers use that. Recently there was a $3 million renovation project that was completed there. So why is a wind project, why does it matter to the wildlife areas? In the letter that was sent from Ducks Unlimited, they mentioned a what is called displacement. Displacement would be the effect of a wind farm being constructed, what it does to the general population levels for a given species. So in the case of this study, it was, let me find my notes here. It was Laguna Madre in Texas. There was a 77% decrease in the redheads detected around the wind farm footprint from a survey before the construction to a survey after the construction, so there were 77% fewer. In this survey, it was redhead duck, which is a species of duck, 77% fewer post-construction than there was pre-construction. And during that time, there was an overall increase in that duck species population by 3 times. So not only was there a 77% decrease, but there was a 3 times increase in overall population. And the front page of that survey is in your packet if you want to see it. The full survey has been, the full study has been emailed to you. The DU letter, the meat of it is we are requesting, or Ducks Unlimited was, I don't speak for Ducks Unlimited, but I want to make sure you understood it. Southeast Kansas Audubon Society request is identical. Our letter is just supporting their request. Their request was a 10-kilometer buffer zone around Neosho Wildlife Area, a 5-kilometer buffer zone around Neosho State Fishing Lake, Lake Parsons, and the Wetland Reserve Program properties. And the big key there is that Southeast Kansas Audubon and DU both recognize that large industrial wind farms do negatively affect overall population of bird life. Now, the contention is how much. And to be honest, after spending months and months researching this, talking to other people who have researched it, talking to people who are experts, the exact amount isn't known. Not with any certainty. Now, I can find you a study that'll say you're not going to lose 5% of the bird population near your wind farm. I can find you a study that'll try to scare you to death and say you're going to lose half your birds in your footprint. What most studies say is that more study is needed to be certain about anything. And I can blow your email up with lots of studies if you want that. So what I would request the commission do as a group is just seriously weigh this construction with the balance of the wildlife areas and our heritage with that hunting and bird watching and outdoor culture. The last page is kind of a printout of a map. It shows it's just basically an aerial Google map that I made and quickly did a little paint shop to. The little red dotted areas kind of represent some of the more significant areas of concerns that both groups are concerned about and protecting. As you can see, most of those basically fall around the Neosho Wildlife Area. It is really unique in the region for its wildlife capacity and uniqueness. Have you guys read the 2 letters, commissioners?
I've read the letters, but I think one was about 19 pages long, and I just got it yesterday evening, along with some other things, so I haven't read it.
So did you read the Ducks
Yes.
Unlimited and the Audubon letter?
Yes.
Okay. Do you guys have any questions about those? I want to make sure I answer any questions about them. That was the main point of coming here, is just to see if I can give a political speech, but I don't want to. It's Valentine's Day. So the main point of our concern is protecting those areas that are, one, they're vital interest to the county because they bring in a lot of dollars. Hunting, bird watching, all that.
Oh, exactly, Andrew. I know what you're talking about. I mean, I'm originally from St. Paul. That's a big deal. And the 6.2 mile setback is what they're recommending.
Yes, it'd be 10 kilometers, I believe, from the Neosho Wildlife Area specifically. Some may wonder why it was requested a larger setback. Specifically, the reason it was requested is because it's such an exceptional property. There are so many birds that use it. In this case, it's mostly related to birds because they're the ones traveling in the airspace that the turbines are involved in. But it is just such a wonderful property on the level. It's a national level property, in my opinion, in that just the number of birds that use it, the quality it's developed, the way it's maintained. It's really like I call it a bell cow for the state. Part of this packet is our numbers. They show the number of hunters by year and location that they came from. So if you guys see those, you can kind of apply the economic impact that might have. But it really shows you, like just this year alone, we break it down by state. There were 168 people from South Carolina that came to hunt Neosho Wildlife Area for ducks. So I mean, it's just why would that many people come from South Carolina? So I think it just speaks to the quality of that area. Another point, if you guys have any more questions on that?
Well, I know there's a lot of hunting lodges around St. Paul that, what you're talking about, income. They bring a lot of income.
And I kind of frame it as a Neosho wildlife area argument. It's really not. You got the whole island area, the whole Neosho River Valley, the WRP wetlands, which are private, but they still, hunting lodges, private hunting clubs exist in most of those areas. So we want to protect that revenue from any potential damage or use there. Another thing that I found in my research was that there was very little available for the taller turbines, basically 500 foot and up. Most of the studies were done on smaller turbines, essentially because the larger turbines are only now becoming, online. I wish we could come up with a way of knowing exactly what the larger turbines do in relation to more or less for specific species. Again, I have another study that showed 7 of 9 grassland bird species are displaced, and that persisted for 5 years as a Schaefer and Buell. I believe I forwarded that to you guys. If you need it again, I can send it. But the number of studies, especially the newer they are, they're starting to stack up and say that the main concern with these larger wind farms isn't necessarily the birds hit by the spinning blades, which that is a concern, but it's more so with the birds that are moved out of the area of the farm. That's called displacement. So that's the big thing that spurred both of these, the original DU letter and the SEK Audubon letter that support the DU recommendations. So, any questions on that? I would also like to offer, if the commission is interested, we could do a group tour, or we can do it individually so you don't have to follow the meeting rules of Neosho Wildlife Area. We can get you in there, you can check it out, get a good feel for what's going on, what's happened there recently with the renovation. I wanted to also, some people will say, well, why are you really qualified to even talk about this? So I wanted to just give a little bit about my experience and qualifications to talk about bird life. Essentially, since I've been a little kid, I've kind of watched birds and counted them and logged them, but some of my official experience is Kansas Biological Survey. I've done bird census for them. I do breeding bird surveys for the U.S. Department of Interior. I do bird census for International Shorebird Survey. I'm a seasonal Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks employee and doing bird census at Neosho Wildlife Area. Excuse me. I do compile the Christmas bird count for Parsons. The eBird program I mentioned earlier, which is a Cornell Lab of Ornithology program, I'm a regional reviewer for that. So when someone submits their bird observations, I have to approve them for this general area. I'm a member of Kansas Ornithological Society and the vice president of Southeast Kansas Audubon Society. So I have a lot of experience with birds and doing birds surveys. If you're interested about my qualifications, I brought a study that I've recently participated in at Cherokee Lowlands Wildlife Area, which is the one around Chitopa down there, which I helped with William Busby from Kansas Biological Survey compose, if you want to see it. He literally wrote the book on Kansas breeding birds. So that's kind of my qualifications that you can be talking about. I know that's been brought up a few times. Any questions?
Yeah, what about turkeys? Or prairie chicken?
Prairie chickens are definitely, I'd have to pull the studies up, which there's a lot on prairie chickens because they've done a lot of prairie chicken studies out west. But prairie chickens are definitely affected by large turbines. Turkeys, I have not come across a study that says one way or another.
Well, I know there used to be prairie chickens around Urbana.
Yeah. I don't know of any recent prairie chicken sightings. If someone has a confirmed sighting, I would be interested in it. But I know that as part of Apex's surveys, bird surveys they did, at least from what I was told, they monitored for prairie chickens.
And did not see it. Is that?
I don't believe there was any seen.
No.
I seen 3 prairie chickens about 2 weeks ago. right on 47 Highway, west of the Galesburg Tunnel, maybe within the next mile or two.
And I honestly haven't dove into the prairie chicken studies. I just know that they're affected by the presence of tall objects. And the main reason I didn't dive into them because there generally aren't a lot around here. So I mean, if the commission is interested in that, I can find some studies because that's probably the most studied bird as it relates to wind turbines. So if you're interested, I can look up some studies and get them to you. The one thing, this is probably the last thing I'll say, and then I'll wrap my time up. What I would like and request from the commission, if possible, would be that whatever, if we can come to if our groups can come to an agreement with Apex on some setbacks that are that'll work, that it would be something that you guys would be willing to put into any sort of agreement with them. Not necessarily short-term with Apex, but we know their intention is to sell the development so that, you know, we have this handshake agreement with Apex and then it's sold to Canadian Utility Incorporated and then all that is gone at that point. So I would petition the commission to, you know, whatever you see fit to include in that agreement can be included. I think that's it. I didn't really convey that very well, but I thought I was going to 7:30, so I didn't have time to review it, you know, prepare my mind for it. So, any more questions? Time for a group hug?
Yeah.
Do you have a question?
I do. What of these areas that you have specifically advised of the recommended setbacks are in the footprint?
Define footprint.
Well, I don't know. Allegedly, it's on a map somewhere, I guess.
The footprint, as I know, drawn that I've seen, the area close would be WRP land, directly west of Erie, about 2 miles, and then the north end of Lake Parsons would be fairly close to.
That's right. This one,
Yeah.
right here.
Right. As I understand that these would be the most affected areas that we're mostly concerned about. Now, let's keep in mind here, I say, Audubon and DU both don't want to stick our noses in and tell property owners what they can and can't do. Audubon and Ducks Unlimited have invested in Neosho County a lot over the years, so we're kind of looking out for our investments as well as just what we think is right by the wildlife scenario. No one in either group is really comfortable doing it. We're just trying to do what we think is right and bring as much information to the table as we can. So this isn't, you know, most people know that I'm generally opposed to the wind project in general. I'm not here speaking right now as someone that's generally opposed to the wind project. I'm speaking as someone that's concerned about our wildlife resources and representing legitimate concerns from people that really aren't vested having to live by these turbines, but are definitely vested in the wildlife resource. Does that make sense?
I have a question.
Yes.
Sim, what was the date of that Ducks Unlimited letter that you gave to the commission?
I believe that one was January 4th.
And have there been any follow-up conversations with the commission?
With the commission?
Or has Ducks Unlimited revised their setback suggestions from that January 4th letter?
The suggestions from January 4th have not been revised in a manner that has been publicly stated yet. I will say that Apex has engaged Ducks Unlimited and Southeast Kansas Audubon Society. I would state that at least right now it's in a positive manner, so that's encouraging to our group. So we'll just see where it goes from here.
Is Ms. Shealy aware of any?
And so are the commission.
Are the rest of us going to be enlightened on that?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I did speak with the DU representative that's kind of handling these concerns. And as of right now, the January 4th letter that I read, the requirements request, that's the current position. The 10 kilometers and 5 kilometers. Now, Apex is engaged, I will say that. I'm not here to, I don't want this presentation to come as saying Apex is necessarily doing something wrong. I want to bring the concerns that the two groups had. I don't want to go down that road.
Question. So the studies that showed a decrease in the bird populations after wind farms, is there a time frame post-construction, or was that immediately after this?
I can, if you certainly give me your email, I can forward the studies to you specifically. But there was one study that surveyed 9 grassland bird species, and 7 of the 9 showed persistent displacement after 5 years. Which that's not going to mean that, let's say there's 139 wind turbines built. Let's say right now our level is 100% birds. That doesn't mean that there's going to be 0% birds in the footprint. That macro scale effect, I haven't found a study that really seriously addresses it. Could it be 2% less after it's built? Could it be 20% less? Could it be 50%? I don't know.
And then does it include other variables? Like, was that just that 5 years out? Was it a horribly harsh year?
In theory, this grassland survey had control property, which was surveyed and not part of a wind farm. So they, in theory, they accounted for natural variables. Now, is it possible that that's foolproof and they didn't make a mistake? I couldn't tell you that.
Yes, you stated 168 from, was it South Carolina last year?
In the report from Neosho Wildlife Area that they compile every year, they categorize it by state. This is from Neosho Wildlife Area managers. There was 168 this hunting season, 168 hunting party or hunters from South Carolina.
So if I may follow up, approximately how many are not from Kansas?
They have that number here. Let's see here. There's a percentage here. I don't have that number specifically. They did compile the Kansas numbers. Only 27% of the Kansas numbers were from Neosho County. It doesn't look like the math's been done here, but for reference, there were, in this hunting season, there were 1,520 from Kansas. So the other large numbers were 168 from South Carolina, 115 from Arkansas, 60 from Georgia, 60 from Georgia, 47 from Florida, 61 from Texas. That kind of gives you some context. If somebody wants those percentages, I received this from them in a spreadsheet. We can do the math. They're real easy in spreadsheet. Sir.
Why did you pick redheads? There's very few redhead ducks.
Right, I didn't pick that. That was just one of the displacement studies that had been done.
I hunted this area multiple times, and very few are shot in our area of redheads.
Yeah, I can't comment on that. I don't know the species harvested ratio. The point, and it was DU that picked that study anyway, I didn't pick it. The point is that we want to bring to the commission is the concern that there could be displacement. Like I said before, the 2% displacement is a 50% displacement. I am of utmost confidence there's still going to be birds around, and there's probably going to be some in the footprint. So it's just a question of how much. And the point we were trying to make, both Audubon and DU, is that if possible, let's just try to prevent any of that potential loss from occurring to the more sensitive areas. So it's important to note that both organizations didn't take a stand opposed to the construction of wind turbines. The stand is, let's protect the most sensitive areas, if that makes sense. I don't want it to come off like I'm saying Apex is going to kill all the birds and there's not going to be any in the footprint. But I also think it's important that we realize there aren't going to be as many in the footprint. But how many, no one can be confident in saying. Science isn't settled, in my opinion. Any other questions? And I'll be happy to let anybody's email with birch studies. There's lots of them. Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Andrew.
Group hug at, what time we get out?
1, 2.
1 in the morning with group hug out here in the lobby.
Out on Main Street. It won't be. Thanks, Andrew. 7:30, I guess we have public comment. 5 minutes. And we got 30 minutes, so. Anybody's got anything to say, please? Speak your piece.
I'm Brian Cooper. I think everybody here knows that, except maybe the reporter for the paper, since he can't seem to get my name in the paper. A couple of weeks ago, I was here with the second of 2 studies done by engineering outfits. This one from Georgia Tech. Gave you a copy of the full report. They done a study in conjunction with University of Alabama, Huntsville, on safety setbacks. About 20 pages of pretty intense calculations that we really got off in the weeds and it was hard to understand, but the bottom line was about 20 pages into it, gave real simple formulas to calculate what safety setbacks should be with wind turbines. And for about 2 weeks, it cost me $50 to have the right to print it. I'm hoping that you looked at it and did you do the math? How are you concerned? Any way you slice it, the setbacks need to be dramatically higher than what's being proposed. I think it'd be pretty easy to drive halfway across the country and say it's safe enough for you people out in the country. But, you know, they're going to go home a month for a year, and we're going to be living in these things. I want to be safe in my house, and I want my grandkids safe in my property. And I think you should adopt realistic safety setbacks. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Other than, are we interested in, have we done the math? Mr. Doe?
I've read it, so.
You need, I gave you a sound meter, you need a calculator?
I've got a calculator.
Thank you. Use your calculator. Thank you.
Speaking citizens, we only got 30 minutes. Doug Reed, and I have some questions I hope maybe you can clear up for me so everybody kind of knows. I know it's not really a discussion item, but in the pilot program, I had questions on the pilot program. In the pilot program, the latest one I've seen from Apex says that they want to give Galesburg 30% of the pilot or $100,000. Are you guys in agreement with that part of the pilot program?
I'm not.
I talked about that 2 weeks ago. I would not have agreed with that in the first place. I know at the first town hall meeting that was brought up and that all that money should be spent if that project went through in that area, and I disagree with that completely.
It's under discussion. All those agreements are with the lawyers, and I'm not going to comment on it until they get done with it.
That's fine.
Not going
That's
to
fine,
negotiate
but
against myself.
That's one of, I didn't know if you had some number that Galesburg will get, or if there's a percentage in there or something. I know you can't do numbers because you don't know what the pilot's going to be for sure. And the other part of the pilot, the 25% for education, the schools, are we in conjunction with that? If you can comment, and if not.
Actually, we have not settled on anything like
Yeah.
that yet.
Well, I understand that because I understand particularly when you just got 3, you can't 2 of you can't get together and discuss it. So is all the pilot negotiations, is it going to take place in an open meeting, or is it going to be an executive session? Is it an executive session item? Or I don't see how you can ever get together and negotiate a pilot agreement, because you don't, see what I'm saying? So,
Seth?
I'm not sure how we'll do that yet, if it gets to that.
okay. A couple things from the assessor's report that we did. They had a property value guarantee thing from the developers to put in for loss of values of our home that we'll have. That's for him in 5 minutes, has it?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry. Is that something that's gonna be a part of the pilot too? Are they gonna have to put in money to offset the losses from property value? And think about it, you don't have to give me an answer. And decommissioning, I think you've said something about they're gonna have a bond set for, if it would cost $1 million to take one of these down, I think we've gotta be protecting ourselves. Couple things that have you heard any research, because I hadn't until this week, on low frequency noise and infrasound with wind turbines? This is a pretty short article and it's pretty interesting. I couldn't understand people saying, well, I just can't live around wind turbines. Like you said, you could live within 1,000 feet of one. Well, it's not the high frequency sound that we hear that we have to worry about. It's the low frequency sounds. And they travel farther. The high frequency sounds, they kind of space in the atmosphere they go, but the low frequency just keeps traveling on. And they get into your house, and this article kind of said, it's like being a loudspeaker where the noise just keeps bouncing off. It's noise that we keep, many won't be able to pick up, but it's what's behind all the stuff where we hear people getting sick and all that kind of stuff. So I hope you take time to read that or look at that sometime. I don't want to use your time now to discuss it. The other thing, that I've been concerned about is Doppler radar and the effects of, I got all kinds of paper in the Doppler radar being affected, when storms are coming through. Well, this is from Department of Energy and from NOAA. I would think would be a couple of good things that do studies, and they have another group in there that does the studies that we should take a look at and see. I talked about there's a new Doppler radar system. They're picking up the wind turbine blades, and that's what's messing everything up here. They can't track storms for this. So other than that, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Barry. Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Gilbush.
It's Gilbush. I live in southern Neosho County. I'm just going to kind of play off what Brian said. I did a little research and I want to read this, and I pulled this off of information that's been shared. And then I've got a copy of this to give you as well. As the wind industry matures and common citizens are experiencing the effects of living with these industrial power plants, they're gaining experience on how these projects change their lives. As we all know, I believe there is a saying that experience is the best teacher. Consequently, there is an outcry to establish more restrictive setback requirements to protect them and us. A quick search of the internet will illustrate this fact. This is the responsibility of elected officials. I believe that what I'm about to verbalize has been shared with you via email. However, if you will bear with me, I would like to briefly run down a current timeline of recent events concerning this issue. 1/25/19, Ford County, Illinois. Ford County Board votes 9-1 to establish new rules to restrict wind turbines from being built any closer than 2,250 feet from property lines, as long as noise restrictions are also included, as recorded in the Ford County record. 2/5/19, Ford County, Illinois. Revised ordinance requiring wind companies or subsequent buyers, should the project be sold, to guarantee to pay any value difference in a house that was sold if it's sold for less than 5% of market value or assessed value. Again, Ford County record. 2/1/19, State of Nebraska. Senator Tom Brewer of Gordon, Nebraska, proposed a bill, LB 373, establishing a 3-mile temporary setback from homes for a 2-year period to allow counties to establish proper zoning laws if they want to host wind energy facilities, as reported by KWBE.com, KWBE 1450 AM and 94.7 FM. 2/11/19, Neosho County, Kansas. Health issues were presented by a citizen at a commission meeting requesting a moratorium to fully study the effects of living too close to these wind projects. YouTube.com recorded commissioners meeting. 2/6/19, Sedgwick County, Kansas passes a 6-month moratorium on wind energy development to allow time to develop proper rules and regulations. KWCH 12 report. 2/6/19, Reno County, Kansas. Residents seeking a moratorium on wind energy development. However, the commissioners dodged it and handed it off to their planning commission. 2/6/19, Tippecanoe County, Indiana. Industrial wind energy projects were banned. KWLFI TV News Channel 18. This is a representative sample of current actions on concerns surrounding these wind projects from a pretty far array of locations. The resounding theme is citizen concern and experience with living next to them and elected officials attempting to do their job to protect their citizens. I reiterate, as this wind industry matures and more is known, a greater distance from human habitation is being demanded. Thank you.
I just wanted to add one thing to Ed's speech there. Reno County just turned down the wind farms.
Anyone else?
I'm Cheryl Burton. I have one question concerning the setbacks. In our previous commission meetings, the county commissioner said a 1,000-foot setback is not substantial, is not there. We were not going to do 1,000-foot setbacks. Why are we still entertaining the 1,000-foot setbacks with every study that Apex does? They use and they give their people to do their studies 1,000-foot setbacks from our property lines. And is a 1,000-foot setback still not viable with you people? With you commissioners?
Not for me.
I have not made up my mind yet.
Commissioner Bedell?
Part of the negotiations, or not negotiations, but the review of the documents that the lawyers are looking at, and I'm not going to comment on that.
Just for sure, copy that with you.
Sure.
Neat. And I thought I was
You get around better than I do.
And I thought I was taller than that.
Anybody else? We got maybe a couple more. Yes. Come up, sir.
I've got the letter here from the Cloud County Commissioners.
Thank you.
And
Would you mind stating your name for the record? So
Yeah.
you state
Greg Carter. And does Randall need a copy of all this?
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
that would be nice, yes.
Thank you, Greg.
And I've got the original letter here. I'm going to keep it. But I do have a few things here. Have you considered how much land has been leased? When an owner leases his land, to me, that's a, let's do it. Okay, you've got 46,000 acres leased. $5 an acre. That's 230,000. You got 139 turbines. There's probably, just say they make 5,000 a piece. You're talking close to $1 million a year that you would be taken away from private landowners. And I love the wildlife. I want the ducks. A little setback would be appreciated there, but you know, that's something to think about. As far as the ice throw,
How many ice storms have there been? How much danger, how many people have been killed by wind turbines? The professional you had, the hearing guy, Apex had, you don't hear the low volume noises. He said there was no danger from it. He's an expert, he's been in the industry for how long? Okay. And as far as danger is, how many people drive cars? How many wrecks are there? Okay, you do Mr. Cooper's math on car wrecks. According to that, you end up with everyone in this room is going to be in a car wreck at least this year. School finance. They all keep talking about saving the land for their kids, their grandkids, their great-grandkids. Well, where are they going to be going to school? Because as far as the state has been going, they've indicated they want to do away with the small schools. So is everybody okay with sending their kids to one school to Chanute? Think about that. I called 3 counties in Kansas. They've all got wind farms. They have noticed no drop in valuation of land. Now, it depends on whether you're talking about county assessed land or a house, county assessed house, which it will not drop unless there's something wrong with the house. But market value, that's a little different. You get somebody looking at a house that doesn't like a turbine, they may not want to buy that house. You got to find another buyer. But as far as they said, no, they've noticed no decline. They said when land comes for sale out in the country, whether it's got turbines or not, house or not, it's gone in a flash. And that was Coffee, Cloud, and Nemaha County. And these wind turbines, they're not just out there going round and round all the time. They've got safety sensors on them. When they notice it out of balance, they shut down. There will be an O&M building in the county. If there's ice forecast, they're going to shut them down. That's about all I've got to say.
I have a question.
Thanks for your time.
Mr. Carter, how far do you live from the Neosho?
Does it matter? I own land.
I don't care. Do you live in the...
No, I'm not going to have one right at my back door, and neither are you guys. You guys don't even know where the turbines are going to be. These guys don't even know where the turbines are going to be.
Yes, we do.
No, you don't.
We know what's been pinned by.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
order.
That was a request put into the FAA so they will know where the flight paths are. That does not mean that's where the turbines are going to be. Have you set where they're going to be? Okay. They don't even know where. How do you guys know where they're going to be? Where they're going to be?
We need order.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Nobody yelled at or was disrespectful for your side when you talk, so give this gentleman respect.
Thank you, Commissioner.
This is out of order.
Thank you.
I do have one more thing.
Okay.
I didn't really appreciate the way they treated Adam Thompson this last week. I just didn't like the way they were attacking him like a newborn calf and a bunch of coyotes. I just didn't appreciate it at all.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Anybody else?
My name is Andrew Roberts. I grew up in Neosho County. I live in Thayer. I don't know if this is going to be my backyard or not. What I seem to understand is the taxes needed each total in Neosho County is going to be maybe $60 million. Not sure. It's a total over the 25 projected year span of this project. From what I understand, the tax credit that Congress is giving for this project is on the order of $200 million. So some of the discussion I'm hearing is that maybe there needs to be a little bit more money put out to help the people who have not signed the leases to protect the valuation of their property, their assets, their way of life.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks,
Dusty?
Andrew.
Dusty Ellsworth. I just wanted to make a couple comments to what Greg said, respectfully, waiting my turn. I do drive a car, and to use that comparison is absolutely crazy. I could choose not to drive a car. I can take that risk into my own hands. I can choose to drive a gravel road instead of a highway. I can choose to drive around a big city instead of driving through. I can take risk into my hand. My neighbors making me take risk is different than what that is. I have not chosen that, and I don't want to take on that risk. Secondly, the ice throw. Waverly Wind Farm, as you know, I have family that live up there. I talked to a gentleman who has wind turbines on his land. I'm not going to tell you the gentleman's name. I'm not going to tell you where it's at. There has been 2 ice throw episodes in Waverly County in 2 years. He had a tractor sitting 1,300 feet from a wind turbine. It threw ice through the cab of the tractor and shattered both windows in his tractor. Wind company covered it. Wasn't no big deal. But for them to say that that is something that will not happen is utterly false. I mean, it's been operational for 2 years and it's happened twice already. The other thing I'd like to touch on is Mr. Stovall was generous enough. I asked him if I could see the preliminary, again, preliminary, I'm not saying that it's permanent, just around my house. That's all I wanted, was the sections around my house. And what I noticed in that is the turbines just in that area, and I'm sure if we could all see the map, they are farther from the participating homes than they are to the non-participating homes. And that, to me, is not right. Again, it's preliminary, so I'm not going to say that's where it's going to stay. But for Mr. Carter to say it does not matter, it does matter. We, the people, the non-participants that are going to have these next to us, are being forced to live with something for the next 30 years. If they retool them up and keep them going, who knows? I may live with it for the rest of my life. So it is important. And I have struggled with the fact that in the right to bury, which is where the setbacks are thrown into the contracts, I have struggled with the fact that a participating landowner is getting protection up to 1,200 feet from their house, and we're only getting 1,640. I feel like they deserve no protection from the commission. They signed the documents. Obviously, they don't care. So I would also ask that that be pulled out of there, and as long as they are away the fall radius from the turbine, which is 660 feet, that you can put a turbine that close to their house. I would ask all that be considered whenever you guys look, because it is going to affect us. That's all I had. Thank you, guys.
Anybody else? We got 3 or 4 minutes. Yes, sir.
Greg Bloodgart, I spoke to you here a couple months ago.
How you doing, Greg?
Just fine. Brought a couple of highlights and a full report here. Everybody here to go through all. The headline here, when I spoke to you the first time, I was talking about trends. I emphasized Fort Scott losing their hospital, Independence losing their hospital, and the fears for Neosho County. Well, here at the end of January, the wind project article caught my eye, but the real thing is on your front page. Neosho Memorial losing $2.1 million last year. So I went to the website and looked at their financial statements. They lost $2 million the year before also. And this is after $780,000 in ambulance subsidy. They're still suffering greater than $2 million losses. Now, I'm not a CPA or a hospital administrator. I'm just a simple farmer, but this trend is not sustainable. And coming down the line, somewhere down the line, we're either going to be putting a property tax levy to subsidize to keep our hospital open, or it's going to close. I don't want to see either one of those things happen. Now, the wind farm will not solve all of our problems, but it's an economic boost, I feel, to the county that could possibly help. Yeah. Increasing our tax base plus the direct payments to the leaseholders. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We've got time for one more if anybody else wants to speak.
It's not mine, I was reading it for someone else.
No, you need to read it. Either use your time or no time.
Well, then I have time in public comment, and I'm willing to read it. What I was saying was, my neighbor graciously agreed to watch my kids so I could be in attendance at this meeting tonight, and she asked that I bring this forth and read it, and I'm willing to do so. My name is Lori Whitworth. I'm going to read an article by Dane Hicks from the Anderson County Review. The wind may blow free, but the use of gag orders and lease agreements and easements that force property owners to keep their mouths shut about the realities they endure owning sites for giant wind turbines make information flow anything but. That's critical in this fat cat tax credit fueled industry, which more and more depends on secrecy as much as it does a steady breeze. Wind farm developers like to point out leaseholders at projects across the country and how few complaints they have about their gigantic tenants. But they never mention the source of that satisfaction: prosecution and financial ruination, if that's a word, due to gag clauses in leases and easement agreements. Where you can keep control of the smoke, there's little evidence of a fire. Keeping tight control of information, particularly criticism from eyewitnesses, allows wind companies like those moving against targets in Lynn and Neosho counties to go about their business without interference from public regulatory authorities and other outsiders who want to chronicle precisely how much damage is being done by wind turbines. Silenced victims suffer for their property, their environment, and their own health. But the gag orders that bind those leaseholders are clear. Speak up, particularly to the newspapers, and not only will your lease payments disappear, but we'll sue you. And we'll still have a 55-story tall wind tower on your land, which you can't stop us from operating. Perhaps the most damning casualty of this secrecy is in the kibosh it has put to extended research on wind turbine syndrome, a health condition identified among many people living near wind turbines, believed to be caused by light flicker from the moving blades, fluctuations in air pressure as those blades move past their base tower, and low frequency noise. In her book, Wind Turbine Syndrome, a report on a natural experiment, Dr. Nina Pierpont conducted extensive clinical interviews with 10 families living near wind turbines in the U.S. and abroad. The pediatrician trained at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine discovered a striking uniformity of complaints from these families. Between her interviews and final publication of the book, 9 of the 10 families had fled their houses for homes away from wind farms, and a 10th, who couldn't afford to move, did extensive renovations to their house in an attempt to defeat the pressure and frequency issues. The story is nearly identical state to state and lease to lease. Landowners who sign leases can't discuss noise, vibration, shadow flicker, or any disruptions the turbine might cause to their properties. The gag orders stop all discussion regarding the terms of the lease or the construction or operation of the turbines, as well as speaking to reporters or issuing statements without the written permission of the wind company. Then there's this jewel. This section shall survive the termination or expiration of this lease, meaning the gag order survives forever, even after the lease is terminated. You are gagged for life. Still, county leaders and impoverished farmers embrace the promise of lease payments and payments in lieu of taxes, since Kansas wind farms are exempt from property taxes. Silence is golden. That's just how the wind companies want it. Dane Hicks, the Anderson County Review, via the Kansas Press Association.
Okay, that ends public comment. James?
Oh.
Okay.
All right, well, we have a few guests this evening that will be talking about property values and some background on the economic tax numbers that were in the economic report. And then I do have some updates on some project-specific information, so we'll try to get through all that in 30 minutes. I would, so let me introduce my guests. I have Chris Abrams from Polsinelli and Mike Maroos from Mike Maroos and Company for the property value. So I think what we'll do is we'll just bring some chairs around, and if that's all right, or unless you want us to just sit here and talk, but the primary purpose of this is a couple things. Chris is here to answer mostly just the questions that you might have had about what happens after with the money. When the money hits the county either through the contribution agreement or when it's on the tax rolls, and when the money goes to the schools. We've been hearing a lot of questions about where does it go after that. So we're hoping to provide answers to your questions and that, and then anything else you have about, you know, kind of the background of the tax values in that report. Again, that report was featured in the information session. It's also posted on our website. There have been a few articles written about it, so we know that there's some questions that have been drummed up about that. And then Mike has finished the property values analysis of Kansas specific to talk about the property values near a wind farm and the data that is available from that research. He will also be able to answer any questions. I know you only received the report last night, so you probably have not had a whole lot of time to look at it. So follow-up questions are always welcome, but I just wanted to make sure you had the author available to answer any questions you might have had from an initial look. And then I will provide some information. So I think what we'll start with is maybe Chris. I'm gonna sit here, and I'll sit up there with you. And then after we've answered the commissioner's questions and presented, we will open up to the greater group and answer as many questions as we can. We have time for. So.
Okay, so I will initially talk about the pilot or the contribution agreement. When those funds come into the county, those are part of the funds for the county to use as necessary.
So everyone can hear, if you wouldn't mind, I'm sorry.
So when the pilot contribution comes into the county, that will go into the county funds, free for the county to use however it may be. Any portion of that is allocated to the school district, by statute, it is considered a gift and not subject to the budgetary requirements of the Kansas regulations. So anything that any school district might receive, it is outside of the budget. They can spend it however they need to spend it from the school district standpoint. That's during the contribution or the first 10-year pilot period. So, and as far as the county goes, there was a question about the spending lid that was put into place on January 1st, 2017. That's, Brownback put that in place so that as property values rise, counties were not allowed to raise property taxes increase budgets exponentially. So we put a cap on it so that a budget cannot be approved, so that based on the prior year's budget plus the cost of inflation for that year. And so that's based on property tax revenue. In this case, those first 10 years, this is not property tax revenue. This revenue should not be subject to that lid. So the lid would only be based on the actual property tax revenues that are spent. So the county could spend prior year's budget plus inflation in addition to this contribution. So that gets us to year 11. That's when the project goes back on the rolls. There's no more contribution agreement. It becomes a taxpayer just like every other business and individual. And so the property is assessed based on its value. It'll go on an annual valuation, and it'll pay the normal tax mills just like everybody else. So, but the value of the project, when that comes in, when that becomes part of the county assessed property, it can actually lower certain parts of tax mills. For instance, the way the school district tax mill is actually comprised of a general fund that's 20 mills, statewide requirement. There's a local option budget fund, which is a calculation based on what the school district's budget is, reduced by the amount of state aid, which then gets down to the local budget. Whatever that local budget number is that can be raised by statute, it is divided by the total assessed value in the county. And then that's what gets to the individual mill. So if all the budget staying the same, if by having this project come onto the rolls, it increases the valuation prospects, thereby lowering the actual mill levy for that local option budget portion of the school district calculation. So from that standpoint, everybody benefits from having a lower mill levy. Now, there are other pieces in there that can actually raise money. For instance, the capital outlay fund. Capital outlay fund is a statutory requirement that allows schools to improve schools, buy school buses. There's a statutory listing of what they can spend it on. It's somewhat limited, but they have a right to go up to 8 mills per year. Currently, the ERIE USD 101 is at 4 mills. So that property that comes onto the rolls will have that property value times the 4 mills. So that will be additional revenue to the county. Now, there's things that you could do depending on what the school district wants to do with the new money or the decreased mill rates. They have the authority to increase that capital outlay to 8 mills. The school board does without a vote. So hypothetically, they could effectively create more capital outlay fund money to improve the school district or any other piece that might be needed. So, and then on other pieces where there's budgets across the board on all these different mill levies, there's budgets. Most of those are based on the assessed value in the county. So again, the mills could go down so that when taxpayers get their overall mill levy rate at the beginning of the year or end of the year, it's actually low. Overall, will be a net lowering of effect by having the assets of the wind farm coming into the county. Does that make sense?
Some of it. Let's sink in for a little bit.
So are you saying that every dollar that would come to the county under the pilot agreement, just hypothetically, that money could be used potentially to lower everyone's mill levy, right?
The contribution is different than
Yeah.
the years 11 through 25.
Right, I'm talking about the first 1 to 10.
That's just to use at your discretion.
Okay.
That doesn't do anything to the mill levies.
Right, but I'm just saying that if every
If
dollar
you wanted to.
that came from the pilot agreement, the commission could use that money to lower the mill levy for everyone in the county, right?
Yeah, you could create a smaller budget for particular things that is used for property tax money, which is subsidized by the contribution.
Okay.
So yes, in effect, yes, you could.
Okay.
Do you want him to cover any of that again? I know it's mind-numbing the first couple of times you hear it, but if there's any part of that description you want him to cover again, maybe use an example, you can.
At the end of 10 years, you said that, what happens with, like, the school systems and stuff? What happens to the mill levies there?
So then it's a part of the standard mill levy, right? So after year 10, the wind farm becomes part of the actual tax-paying public. And so the way those mill levies are actually devised, most of them would go down if they are based on a budget. And it's because that budget would be spread across a higher valuation in the county, because there's additional assets that are on the tax roll.
But that would be up to the school district, right? In other words, if the school district got X number of dollars, they could leave the mill levy the same, or they could raise it, or they could lower it.
Yeah, that is true, but I mean, there are limits to what the school board's budget can be based on students and all of that kind of stuff. So they, you can't just exponentially make it huge or drop it to nothing, because you have a budget, and that gets into a bigger discussion about the actual ongoing lawsuits in Topeka about how the school funding formula. I mean, that's a whole different discussion, and we don't know the answers to that yet. But in theory, if you just from a local level, the dollars that are based on a budget, if you have a higher assessed value, each individual landowner is going to have a lower mill rate to get to that budget. Does that make sense?
Could I ask you to cover the capital outlay for USD 101 again? And tell us what their resolution says they're at and what they're spent, what they're taking in?
I don't know what they're taking in. I know according to their current budget that's been published for the 18-19 school year, they're at 4 mills.
They can go up to 8.
They can go up, there's by statute, they're allowed to go up to 8. I don't know what their resolution is as to what they have, the resolution says their authority is. The statute says they can go up to 8.
Unless the resolution says 8, they can't go up to 8 unless they go through the process again and get the citizens a chance to make it go to election.
Yes, you are correct, yes.
So if the school district, whether it be Erie, Thayer, or Chanute, got pilot money, that would not affect their state, what I call state aid, where the state gives them so much.
That is correct. Yeah.
Because you said basically it would be considered a gift.
Yep. By statute, it is exempt from the budget requirements under Kansas regulations.
Because I was concerned if money went to the schools, then they'd lose state aid. So you're saying
that's not okay. As long as it's a gift. Okay. You could give them $10 million tomorrow to do whatever they want, and they can accept it.
Okay, well, if you think of any other questions, we'll move to property values presentation, and then we'll open it up to questions from everybody as stands up. And I have a copy of this report just for you to have at your.
Is this what you sent us?
It is what we sent, and it is also available online at our website under the About Us page, similar to the Economic Development Report. So, Mr. Bruce, the commission.
Good evening. My name is Mike Maroos. I'm president of Maroos and Company, real estate appraisal and consulting firm. I've been appraising for 42 years and appraised 12,000 plus properties in about 35 states and have significant experience with energy projects and transmission lines. I'm cutting to the chase. I'm going to summarize what I think is considered out of Kansas information and try and be specific, but my report's over 70 pages, and a lot of it is custom to this project. And on the general information, and part of what we do in every one of these is we do the match pairs, looking at sales of comparable residences adjusted for differences that are proximate to turbines and those that are not. That's the first look. The next look is we look at peer-reviewed published studies. We discuss those. And we look at the economics of the project. And we also do participants, or I would say professional surveys of either brokers, property owners, assessors to get their opinions. And then we've been doing this for about 4 years, is we contact every assessor in every county that has a wind farm over 25 turbines and have a general discussion with them as to their familiarity. Do they do special studies in the project? Has there been a tax appeal filed because with the allegation of diminution due to the proximity of a turbine? In their observation, because they get sales as to the differential between the property sales of comparable properties proximate to a wind farm and those that are not, and what they see the future trends are. And if there had been appeals, what is the result? So I've done this study in Indiana, Illinois, Minnesota, South Dakota, Iowa, and now we finished it this week in Kansas. So you've got 21 counties, you call them county appraisers. And you would talk to either the county appraiser or the deputy appraiser with that discussion. Some have concerns, some actually live within a footprint in a project. Not one of them has had an appeal. Not one of them has an instance where they've considered a reduction in the area because of the existence of a wind farm. And what they basically have said is their market is impacted, because most of these are in populations of less than 50,000 people as to the county. They're impacted by the economy. The rural residential properties were impacted from the downturn in the market, or we'll call it the Great Recession from 2008 to 2012. And the market started to come up. Obviously, this last year, with some of the embargoes and the impact of soybean and other prices, and then the shutdown of the government for 3 weeks has created great concern. But what they're finding consistently, paved roads, modern houses, efficient houses, proximity to medical, high-quality schools is what their market wants. And they all are looking to have economic development that will provide jobs for their kids and grandkids to come back to the area where they grew up. So anyway, so that study was done, and the report has information on the project. And you know, in my experience, whether it be Manhattan, San Francisco, South Dakota, North Dakota, Kansas, it has to do with economics. It's not a taste test, it's what's driving and the amenities that an area has. And to have an economic input of over $3 million a year to an area that has not had any population increase, has aging infrastructure, has basically flat values, generally means a very positive support with value. Now, do I take into consideration, and again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not an acoustical engineer, but we read the studies on the ice throw, the medical allegations with shallow flicker, setbacks, the dBA of the sound, and take that also into consideration. So these are all things as an appraiser when I'm looking at a wind farm, or I'm looking at, plant for Hormel, who's got a lot of climate. You look at what's impacting supply and demand of the property, and that's what was done here. So to go, first of all, I talked about Kansas, that we talked to 21 assessors. I talked to 21 assessors and gleaned that information. I looked at values in the county, and just general sales information is provided. What's clear, if you have a modern house over 2,000 feet, you have some outbuildings, and you have a little bit of acreage, and you have a paved road, it's worth over $100,000. There's a lot of demand. The farther out you get, the farther away you get from the services, it gets a little weaker. The gravel roads, it gets a little weaker. If you have a bigger house that's well maintained, the value starts going over $200,000. But the general market is $100,000 to $200,000. If you have a property that hasn't been well maintained, has an old roof, old windows, old kitchen, inadequate bathrooms, the value plummets. It's just supply and demand, whether it's in here or whether it's in South Dakota or Iowa. So in here, I talked to some local brokers, but there's 4 match pairs, because you have no wind farms in your county. So I went and we scoured the whole state to find reasonable match pairs, and there were several that came up that, for a variety of reasons, because of differential in quality, size, age, date of sale, we threw them out. So I have 4 that I included in the report. I talked to 3 of the 4 brokers that were involved in those. The first one, which is in Waverly, it's on a paved road, it's a relatively small house. It sells for a lot more than a similar house farther away. There's 18 turbines that you can see by just rotating around. But that's a little bit of a misnomer, because like almost all these, what I call farmettes, that you basically have a view shield around them where people plant trees, bushes, shrubs to block the wind off of the dirt of the soil. But the broker, I asked the broker, how long was it on the market? 2 weeks. Did it sell for the full price? Yes. Were there any other offers? Yes, there were 2 or 3 other backup offers. What was the impact of the turbines? They knew they were there. They liked it because the house was modern, it was well maintained, and it was on a paved road, and their family lived in the area. This was the best of the stock that they had been looking at for quite a while. The next property was interesting, similar situation, 5 acres. It sold for a longer period. It took 140 days, where the market is 90 to 110. But the house was not in as good a shape. But the buyer that bought it wanted to be out in the country. He wanted a modern building, and he wanted where he had a little bit of a trucking business. He had vehicles, and he couldn't store them in the town. The last one is in here, is the highest sale, is over $300,000, I think it's $385,000. It sold day 1 at basically the full price. People had been eyeballing the house for a couple of years. It was well taken care of, very modern. It was a larger house, over 3,000 square feet. And was the property negatively impacted by the proximity of the turbines? No, not at all. Now, does every buyer want to buy that? There's no question. A lot of people don't like them. I realize that. I don't like mansard roofs. People buy houses with mansard roofs. I don't like split levels. People buy split levels. It's a taste test. With real estate, you don't have to have the entire market buy it. You have to have a market of 1, better a market of 3, and you create value. The other comment I've gotten the sense back on is central and western Kansas are less populated. They're less dense. And I thought about that. And yes, it is, but your population, whether it's 14,000 or 15,000, I looked, and I've done projects in at least 8 counties: McLean, Illinois, Orangeville, New York, Henry County, Illinois, DeWitt, Illinois, Freeborn, Minnesota, two in LaSalle County, Illinois, and one in Macon, Illinois, where the counties were all significantly larger than 14,000. Now, I've done 5 projects in South Dakota. Those counties, one of them's 25,000, but most of them are less densely populated. I've done 2 in Iowa, a little lower population, but Iowa is a fabulous study. What shocked me is the Iowa economy is just killing it because their ag is great, which is really corn and soybean. The hog production is through the roof, and the wind has been fabulous. And what the wind has done for them is it's brought in what's called data centers. And those are basically where we all probably have smartphones on. We have to have that power to provide for all the information we want off the internet. There's been $10 billion of data center development in Iowa in the last 5 years, and a lot of it is attributed to wind. So that's a real quick summary. I'm happy to answer any questions. I glossed over a lot of the report. I think you've seen it. My understanding is you wanted the Kansas feeling. There I am.
I don't understand data centers being related to wind. Could you,
Sure.
You're talking about it in Iowa.
Sure.
I know it's not Kansas, but I'm just interested.
Because there's been all this green energy, Microsoft, Alphabet, Google wants to put that in the public documents.
Saying that they're green.
They're saying that they're green. So rather than develop them, guys, you don't want to do it in New York City because you're vulnerable. You don't want to do it on the east and west coast because of the hurricane situation. Chicago has done very well with it because we're boring and we're in the middle of the country. But because everybody uses so much data today, they're needing to develop these, and they're building them in areas that their land's a lot lower cost. And it's actually, because they can tie into the transmission lines, it's stimulated that development. It's just like when you have a major housing boom, you have what we call rooftops. All of a sudden you need services, you need retail, you need medical to service those needs. Same thing.
They also use a lot of energy.
Oh, they use a tremendous amount of energy.
So they have a big footprint, carbon footprint that they want to offset with renewables. They are one of our greater corporate customers, we call them.
Sorry to go so fast.
No, actually, I mean, it's very understandable. I was gonna ask you the house you were talking about that was $385,000 that sold. I just saw this yesterday evening, so I haven't, it's large. Do you know what it sold for before? Can you give me that information?
I don't know that. I think it had been, I think the people had owned it
For a long time.
for a long time. And I've got about 15 matched pairs that are in other states that I didn't include because I wanted this to be more Kansas focused. And it's not perfect data. There's some inconsistencies, but you know, the data is what the data is. I can't make it up. And you know, some probably show non-conclusive, some are more conclusive.
The data you did include was at least counted by two different sources. So you had sources where like you get
Broker or appraiser.
Yeah, or the.
Right, there are actually
Information
there's multiple sources. So, you know, I heard a little bit tonight, which is a common concern, and I understand the concerns, and I live by O'Hare, and my wife has opinions about O'Hare. So, that I understand the issues, and, you know, some of the stuff is not clear cut, and it can be a little confusing, and that's why we go to so many areas. But now, I'm talking about data centers. Well, because the data centers, you can have all these blogs, and you can have all these opinions. There's only 7 or 8 peer-reviewed articles that are out there, and I summarized them. And there's none of them that come up with a conclusion that there's a negative impact because of wind. there are blogs out there that are not peer reviewed that are very negative to wind. I mean, you know, we all can get our hand held out and find them right now.
On your qualifications or your signature, it's got MAI beside your name?
Yes.
Can you explain to us what that means and the CRE?
The MAI is the oldest appraisal organization. It's the most esteemed. It's kind of like the law degree, the CPA. There's 6,000 of us in the world. And it's basically like a grad school or triathlon. You have to do 8 weeks of courses plus a day and pass a 2 to 8 hour test. There's 5 years of peer review where people kind of go over MAIs on the other side of the table like you're doing. Review, make comments, critique, and you have to pass that. When I did it, we had to do 2 demonstration reports, which are, again, they're like 2 theses. They're a couple hundred pages long, have to be reviewed and critiqued. And then there's a comprehensive exam, which now is 4 parts of 2 days. And again, you have to pass all parts. So, I mean, are we copying the lawyers and the CPAs? Of course we are.
How long have you been had that designation?
You're dating me 37 years.
Okay.
19,
In other words,
November
you
of
just didn't get it
1980.
yesterday.
No. And I was an 8-year public official for a town of 38,000 people. Sat on finance, or chaired finance, chaired public safety, was liaison to planning and zoning. So I know what it's like to be on the other side. It's not easy.
Okay, what is the uniform standard of professional appraisal practice?
And I didn't answer your second question. The council or the CRE is counselors of real estate. It's invitation only. It's supposedly the highest level of real estate consultants in the world. It involves some attorneys, a third probably appraisers, real estate financiers, planning. Back to the use path, that's the appraisal rules. So that's done by the standards board, which is based out of a group out of Washington, D.C. And these are the rules we have to follow.
So you're saying that our county appraiser, Mr. McElroy's evaluation is wrong?
No. I read his evaluation and understood his concern, and I responded with a letter a couple weeks ago and went over the issues. And I thought his issues were very good, and addressed the issues and just basically provided some responses. So, you know, he touched on property value guarantees. I touched on that. I mean, there's not a wrong answer. I mean, I just gave a response. I'm more than familiar with Michael McCann, who's not an MAI. He was not licensed in Illinois for the last 2 years, unfortunately, and he hasn't done wind farm studies in probably 3, but he passed away last November, December. So he's not around to defend himself, so I'm not going to make any more comments. But there's some issues out there with Mr. McCann. Then this issue with some of the recommendations on insurance and all that, that's really up to your decision. That's not something that I'm going to touch. The same thing with the commissioning. I mean, I think that's been something that's been done that can be handled. And then peer review articles, I mean, I went directly at that. All I did was provide additional information. So I was not disagreeing, I was just providing some additional information.
I don't have any more questions.
Okay, is that our 30 minutes?
No.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure there is enough time to open up to the public questions too, but I have a few updates, so I'll just take a few minutes. Last week, thank you, don't go too far, you have some questions. Last week, Vestas was on the agenda to come and answer questions. And unfortunately, due to weather, we canceled the meeting. So we went ahead and requested a letter to clarify the question about the safety setback that has been taken out of context. That's not actually a safety setback, but I want to read just an excerpt from this letter, but you're more than welcome to read it yourself. I'll send you copies as well. But Vestas says, outdated Vestas work instructions unfortunately continue to be quoted by opponents of wind energy projects, as it appears to be the case here. Vestas has updated our manuals, and we now address clearance areas in the case of incident in site-specific ERPs. An ERP is an emergency response plan. An emergency response plan that are tailored for each wind farm. The ERP for a specific project will include temporary clearance areas that should be used when the area is cleared in the case of an incident. This specification of a clearance area, however, should not be cited as support for any siting distance for wind turbines, as this does not apply to normal operating conditions. Rather, the language applies only in case of an incident. I will also point to the description of incidences in the letter and how that Vestas turbines are sophisticated electrical equipment. Abnormal operating conditions can occur, but in which case the turbine monitor sensors and control system logics are set to automatically shut down the equipment. This is for your information and review. I know there is a lot of debate on how dangerous these machines are, but this just, from the manufacturer, says that incidences that they have the emergency response plans in place and that the equipment has safeguards in place to not have incidences. So what you're talking about here in this debate is really the perceived risk. I'm not going to go into the debate right now and our position on it, as you know exactly how we feel, that these are some of the safest machines you can have. I know there are opposite opinions about